Hello everyone, for Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. To begin today, we begin here in Venezuela. The campaigns are over and Venezuelans now have 2 days free from all electoral propaganda before they cast their votes on Sunday. Some 19 million Venezuelans will be eligible to vote for the members of the National Assembly. Now, until then, Venezuela law prohibits all media coverage of parties, candidates, or campaign issues. The head of the Electoral Council says all the preparations are in place.
We
want to tell the country that we are completely ready. All the work we have done over recent months, the testing and training, and now it's just the logistical part, which began on Tuesday with the transfer of both the technology and the voting kits to the polling stations.
And the UNICEF monitoring mission met with different authorities and leaders of all parties ahead of Sunday's elections. The regional body's monitors explained what their role would be during the polls and voting stations, and they made a presentation of the delegation's credentials. The UNICEF monitors have been selected due to their wide experience in election processes. And for a brief update now on the atmosphere here in Venezuela as these key elections approach, we're going to turn to our correspondent here in Caracas, Isabel Fimbo. Isabel, tell us what's the atmosphere here? Campaigns are closed. People make their final decisions. What are people saying? What's the mood?
Well, here in Venezuela and Caracas, everything is ready for the election. Since Tuesday, schools have been closed, and today because they're going through the voting centres. And today, the last machines are being installed, and the people working in the voting stations are receiving their final training today. We've also, from 6 p.m. this evening, the ley seca begins, which is that no alcohol can be sold or drunk in the country until Monday.
Okay, preparing for the elections. We know that they've been preparing for these elections for some time now. Have there been any difficulties, any last-minute difficulties ahead of Sunday's vote?
Well, no, there haven't been any last-minute difficulties, to be honest. They in terms of issues along the way, along the campaign, there was the murder of the opposition leader Luis Manuel Diaz, but that turned out to be criminal, not political motivated. The CNE, the Venezuela's electoral body, has also had to sanction some groups, for example, the Catholic University, for publishing a video for inciting violence. They also sanctioned another group called Min Unidad for its logo being just too similar to the opposition. So we can see there that they don't work just in favor of government parties.
All right, Isabel, we'll be sticking with you on Sunday as we all follow these crucial elections. Izzy, thanks so much. And in France now, dozens of protesters were detained by French police. The activists entered a corporate activity which was organized as part of the COP21 summit to criticize the role played by transnational corporations. French police entered the Grand Palais and detained the activists for some hours. And Telesur's very own Sergio Rodrigo and Lucia Munoz were among those detained while covering this protest. For more now, we turn to our Telesur English correspondent, Luis Arroyo. He is joining us from Paris. Luis, I assume that you were not detained. What can you tell us now about our colleagues there, Sergio and Lucia? Are they still detained by police? What do we know about their case? Why were they detained?
Hello, Cody. How are you? Well, Sergio and Lucia have already been released. They were just among a group of activists that were held for more than an hour by French police in central Paris. They were covering this protest. However, they have been released right now, but they were beaten by police agents, and they were also, their passports were retained by police for this hour, and they had no explanation of what happened, why they were detained.
Sorry, Luis, did you say they were beaten by police?
Yes, Lucia was beaten. They threw her to the floor. So yeah, but they are okay. But yeah, they were beaten by the police.
Are they doing okay? Were they evaluated by doctors there?
Yes, everything is fine with them. I mean, like, it just was this terrible episode, and it's because of the strong measures that French authorities have imposed because of the exception state that is taking place here in France. But I mean, like, they are okay.
Okay, and we know possibly maybe why the police are sort of why things are tense there. Security in Paris has been tight after those terrorist attacks. Do we know whether there any violence in that protest that they were covering at the time?
Well, right now there has not been more reports about violence, but tomorrow is going to start the alternative summit, and many activists are gonna be there. So we don't know yet if something else is going to happen. I mean, like, the officials from the United Nations have said that this is the COP with more civil society involved, but I mean, like, the civil society is just not present here. So that's an issue, and they want to raise their voices and they want to take the streets. So let's see what happens in coming days.
All right, Luis Arroyo, please continue to check on our colleagues there, but you have now confirmed that they have been released and they are in good health and doing fine. Luis, thanks so much.
Thank you, Cody.
The latest round of Colombia's peace talks in Havana have come to an end, this time with opposing visions on the future, both by the FARC and the Colombian government. The guerrillas argued through a statement that some within the government are trying to insist in maintaining the ongoing conflict. One of the most controversial issues has been using a referendum as the mechanism to approve a final agreement. The Colombian Senate has passed a bill establishing a referendum as the mechanism to ratify the peace agreements that will be reached between the FARC and the government in Havana. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita now reports from Bogota.
After a heated 7-hour debate, Colombia's Senate approved a plebiscite that will allow citizens to vote either yes or no to any final peace agreement with the FARC. At least 13% of the country's 33 million registered voters will have to approve the deal.
In order to ratify the peace agreements reached in Havana, a minimum of 4.5 million Colombians will have to vote for the yes, and also the amount of yes ballots must be higher than the ones for the no.
The government will have to finance media access for both the yes and no campaigns. Also, 1 month ahead of the voting, the content of the peace agreements must be publicized prime time on private and public television.
We are honoring the right of Colombians to say yes or no to a peace process that is indeed going to succeed. Colombians will be able to go to the polls freely, with full guarantees, and with precise information on what the yes and the no implies. That's what matters.
However, the FARC peace delegation has already rejected the plebiscite as it's a mechanism that has not been agreed within the negotiations, something they have said jeopardizes the peace talks and its bilateral character.
Despite the strengths or weaknesses of the referendum, the point is that it must emerge from an agreement between the parties. The peace negotiations are not between the parties in Congress, nor between the Congress and the executive power. They are between the FARC guerrillas and the government.
The left-wing Democratic Pole voted in favor of the plebiscite, but with the proviso that its implementation must be agreed at the negotiating table in Havana.
Our political party will continue to support the implementation of the plebiscite only if it's a part of the negotiation agreements. At the moment, we just have approved a mechanism that could be used or not.
Now, the peace plebiscite bill will just need to be reviewed by the Constitutional Court in order to be signed by the President and then proclaimed. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
Hundreds of public workers took to the streets in Mexico to protest against a new pension scheme proposed by the president, Enrique Peña Nieto. Now, the new scheme would pave the way for the privatization of the state workers' pension system. The bill is now being discussed by the parliament. And the leaders of 17 political parties revealed the number of lawmakers willing to support Dilma Rousseff against her impeachment in Brazil. Now, if the vote was held today, President Rousseff would stay in power. The leading parties in the Brazilian lower house confirmed that Dilma has the decisive backing of 258 lawmakers, more than the number of votes needed to stop her impeachment. Wagner Freitas, the leader of Brazil's largest workers' union, the Central Union of Workers, announced that his organization would be staging demonstrations in support of Dilma Rousseff. Freitas said they will defend democracy against attempts to oust the president. Argentinian presidential-elect Mauricio Macri met a couple of hours ago with President Dilma Rousseff. Both leaders spoke about commercial projects still pending in the Mercosur trade bloc, where Argentina and Brazil are the largest economies. Now, Macri will now head for Chile, where he will meet with the president there, Michelle Bachelet. Concerns in Argentina mount ahead of Macri taking office. His party has promised that it will have a new focus on human rights and on the trials involving crimes of the military dictatorship. With the latest now, we turn to our correspondent in Buenos Aires.
President-elect Mauricio Macri announced that he will let the judiciary carry on with the multiple trials prosecuting crimes against humanity, but he has failed to commit his government to keeping remembrance, truth and justice a matter of state policy, something that was a cornerstone of the three Front for Victory administrations.
There is a vast social maturity. I don't think that anyone can ignore all the things that remain to be done, and that human rights cannot be thrown into the rubbish, nor swept under the carpet. With more strength than ever, we will continue with the struggle.
Human rights organisations are well aware that they have an uphill battle against the incoming government. Mauricio Macri, who takes the oath on December 10, has in the past labelled human rights organisations and their causes a scam.
History is obliging us all to take off from everything that we have achieved in recent years. We Argentinians have suffered too much to give us the luxury of revising on the historical reparations we have achieved, and that the repair is done with remembrance, truth and justice.
There is growing concern over the incoming government's focus on the trials, as it will withdraw the federal state support into more hearings. Moreover, the La Nación newspaper, historically on the far right of the political spectrum, published an editorial only hours after Macri's electoral win, asking the president-elect to let those imprisoned for genocidal acts to serve out their terms under house arrest.
We understand that we must counteract a very large hegemonic message which goes against remembrance, and we will not let them triumph. We want more and more rights, more equality, and more social inclusion. We are much older now, but will continue doing exactly the same. We will peacefully resist. We will not give up because besides our walking sticks and our wheelchairs, we are still on our feet, and we will continue to stay on our feet.
Human rights activists all across the board say that they will remain alert and ready to defend the vast improvements Argentina has experienced in terms of human rights over the past decade. Organisations such as the Mothers and the Grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo have wide acclaim locally and abroad for the historical struggle and will continue to march for more truth and justice alongside the people. Leo Gaduti, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
On Thursday, Haitians from various political parties marched through the streets of Port-au-Prince in a continued protest of the results of the country's October 25th presidential elections. Now, many believe the result was fraudulent. In a runoff vote next month, the government-backed candidate Jovenel Moïse will face Jude Celestine, who is the former head of Haiti's state construction company. Are militants from the so-called Islamic State in Thailand? That's what plenty of people in that area of the world are talking about. We'll have the latest on some of those claims and accusations when we come back. Stay with us. that have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
A leaked Thai police memo has revealed that authorities there were warned by Moscow about 10 Syrians working for the so-called Islamic State group who entered Thailand in October to target Russians. Now, the information was passed by Russia's intelligence agency, but Thai police say they have not been able to confirm the presence of those Syrians. According to the memo, their plan was to target Russians within Thailand in an attempt to raise fear and damage relations between both countries. A deputy spokesman for the Thai police confirmed the memo was authentic. And the German parliament has approved sending military support to the U.S.-led coalition fighting against the Islamic State in Syria. Now, the vote will authorize the government to deploy 1,200 soldiers to fight in the Arab nation, together with tornado jets and naval support. This is the largest operation launched by Germany abroad in years. Meanwhile, Germany's foreign minister says a drawn-out conflict in Syria is in nobody's interest and a political solution remains the priority.
Nobody, not the Americans, not us, not the Russians, wants this deployment to go on for many years. That is the reason for my remarks that nobody have mentioned, neither Russians, nor Americans, nor Europeans, nor the neighboring countries of the region, is of the opinion that this will be a conflict that can ultimately be solved militarily. Therefore, its military intervention will be strongly embedded within an overall concept that places the emphasis on working out a political solution. I venture to say that if we make progress on a political solution, when we really take steps forward, then the military conflict will be of a manageable length.
3 weeks after the attacks in Paris, a cafe there where 5 people were killed has reopened its doors. Speaking to the press, the owners of À la Bonne Bière said that it was time for unity and to move forward. Several other eastern Paris cafes and restaurants hit in the attacks that killed 130 people. Hope to reopen soon as the city seeks to just resume normal life. France's regional elections are set to take place on December 6th, and the country's far-right National Front is set to score some huge gains there. The anti-immigration, anti-Europe party has gained popularity since Marine Le Pen took over as chief from her father in 2011. The party has also been boosted by fears over the refugee crisis and the November 13th attacks. According to recent polls, the party is leading in the first round in 6 out of the 13 regions. Spain's electoral campaign kicked off. The people will hold general elections on December the 20th there. Now, the poll is expected to show the rise of the left-wing Podemos party as Spaniards are disappointed about many traditional politicians. Spain continues to feature one of Europe's highest unemployment rates despite a set of austerity measures implemented by Mariano Rajoy's government. Earlier this Friday, scores of Palestinian protesters hurled stones at Israeli security forces in the occupied West Bank city of Bethlehem. In turn, the security forces fired stun and smoke grenades at the protesters. Now, in a separate incident, a Palestinian stabbed and wounded an Israeli near the city of Ramallah, and according to the Israeli army, he was then shot dead. Over the past 2 months, 19 Israelis have been killed by Palestinians, while Israeli forces have killed 101 Palestinians in the same period. An explosion in Egypt's capital of Cairo left 16 people dead. A Molotov cocktail sparked a fire in a local nightclub, which became uncontrollable. Now, conflicting versions of the motive of the attack are still being investigated, but terrorism has not been discarded there. Despite it being one of the worst crew gluts in history, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, is maintaining its policy of pumping near record volumes of oil into the market. In fact, the group, which produces a third of global oil, decided to increase its collective output ceiling to 31.5 million barrels per day from the previous 30 million. However, the poorer OPEC members have been piling pressure on its wealthier members, led by Saudi Arabia, to curb supply and drive up prices.
The strategy is working. The only question remaining is when the market is going to be balanced between the supply and demand. And we think that we are heading towards the right direction. There is a huge drop in investment. It will manifest itself through the reduction in oil production, and signs of the reduction is already there. We can see it happening.
After a pause of heavy rainfalls, water levels lowered in India's southern state of Tamil Nadu. Now, this gave rescue teams a chance to step up operations there to evacuate people stranded across that city. Now, the city of 70 million inhabitants is experiencing its heaviest rainfall in over a century. Thousands have been driven from their homes by the massive floods. China made a groundbreaking pledge of $60 billion in cooperation for Africa. President Xi Jinping made the startling announcement during the Africa-China Cooperation Summit, currently underway in South Africa. Now, the money would go for infrastructure projects.
China-Africa relations have today reached a stage of growth unmatched in history. We should scale the heights, look afar, and take bold steps. Let us join hands, pool the vision and strength of the 2.4 billion Chinese and Africans, and open a new era of China-Africa win-win cooperation and
Australian Mick Fanning has won the Triple Crown, which is sort of known as the World Cup of Surfing. The competition took place in Hawaii on Thursday. Fanning, who survived a shark attack in July, is leading the world ranking now. The announcement, Fanning said, it's been a dream to win an event in Hawaii, and in true surfer fashion there, he said he was stoked. In Bolivia, traditional clothing and high fashion have sort of met there. Our correspondent Dimitri O'Donnell has more on what's being called the Cholita dress.
Browsing for a bargain at Bolivia's Cholita fashion fair. Dresses, shawls, blouses, shoes and hats are on sale, sourced and manufactured in Bolivia for the Cholita market. Native Bolivian women, known as Cholitas, are famous in the Andean region for their dress.
I'm showing you one of the typical dresses that we make. The skirt is made with 6 layers of petticoats. There are also ones with 8 layers that we make. And then you have the blouse, the shawl, hats, and shoes.
Most of the clothes at this fair are handmade. These Cholita dresses take a full day's work for the artisans, and with demand higher than ever, they say they've never been busier. 21-year-old Estella is part of a new generation proud to wear the traditional costume. A full outfit, including hat, bespoke jewellery, shawl and shoes, can cost up to $2,000.
My mom always wears a skirt, and for me it's a matter of pride feeling that I am a citizen of La Paz and from El Alto at heart.
This fair is an important showcase for the artisans who face competition for cheaper imported clothing from Chile, Brazil and China.
We want to show and spread the skilled work of our craftsmen in El Alto. In this case, we have the milliners, the artisans who make skirts, who make blankets, the jewelers, all focusing on the dress of the Alteña Cholita.
This year's event was such a success that organisers are already planning to make next year's fashion show even bigger, better and more colourful. Dimitri O'Donnell, Telesur, La Paz.
That's what we're covering on this Friday. Be sure to stay with us as we cover elections in Venezuela. We'll have Isabel Fimbo. I'll also be in the streets on Sunday, providing coverage throughout the day. Also, check out our website for the latest news, also on those elections, but also around the region. telesurtv.net/English. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as well. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll have the latest news for you back here in just a few hours.